Good morning, everybody. Can everybody hear me? Just checking the technical things here. Anybody wave? Yeah, we've got some voices. Good, good. Well, this morning we're going to continue our series on the fruit of the Spirit, and this week we're going to look at more detail at gentleness, or as it'll probably say in some of your translations, meekness. Now, if technical things work properly, I'm just going to share my screen here. Let's hope this goes well. Okay, so the translation that I'm going to stay with here is meekness. So let's just remind ourselves of the text that we've been studying. You'll find it in Galatians chapter 5, verses 22 and 23. This comes in a section where Paul is teaching the Galatian church how to live out this new Christian faith in their daily lives. So it says this: but the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, meekness, and self-control. Against such things, there is no law. So I had a visit from a friend last week who told me about his apple tree. He had bought it when it was just a young tree, probably from one of the bargain stores, like maybe B&M or Pound Stretcher, so he didn't expect much from it. But he tended it and he watered it for maybe around 4 years, and every year it seemed to grow a bit, and sometimes it flowered, until one year in the spring it was covered in blossom, and after the blossom, tiny little fruit began to grow. Well, he was really excited to get some apples, but as the fruit began to develop, it became obvious that something odd was happening. As the first fruit seemed to be all misshapen, and then he realised it couldn't possibly be an apple tree, because despite the picture on the packaging, his tree was growing pears. It was a pear tree. And this story brought home to me how important it is to understand the fruit of the Spirit. Luke chapter 6, verse 44 says, each tree is recognised by its own fruit. So when he describes the fruit of the Spirit in Galatians, Paul's showing us how to recognise the signs of spiritual growth in our lives, the emergence of spiritual fruit. Now, the fruit in Galatians is like one fruit bursting with all these different flavours. I love to watch TV programmes about food, and they're all about flavour. When all the flavours in a dish are in perfect balance, that's going to be a great dish. But dishes can be spoiled if the flavours are out of balance. Healthy spiritual fruitfulness will demonstrate all the qualities listed in Galatians, but in a balanced combination, none of them overpowering or stifling the others. And the particular flavour we're going to have a bit of a taste of today is meekness. Now, the word that's most often translated in the New Testament as meekness comes from the Greek word praus or praiotes, and it doesn't really have an exact equivalent in modern English. Meekness and gentleness come close, but to really understand what Paul means here, we need to understand the nuances in the word as it was originally used. Meekness was partly seen by the Greeks to be a virtue, and it was taken to mean a calm and gentle temper. Aristotle described the praus man as one who is always angry at the right time, but never angry at the wrong time. The biblical linguist Samuel Meyer described it as the patient and hopeful endurance of undesirable circumstances, identifying the person as externally vulnerable and weak, but inwardly resilient and strong. Externally vulnerable and weak, but inwardly resilient and strong. He said that a meek person had learned to control the destructive instincts that prevent them from living in harmony with others. Praus could also be a military word, and it was used in the training of horses. The most highly trained horses were the ones who had learned to trust the horsemen. So they responded immediately to every command. They were courageous and they were obedient, and they could become war horses, ready to be led into battle or into danger without bolting or panicking. The Greek writer and soldier Xenophon wrote about this around 354 BC in a piece called The Art of Horsemanship. He described a conditioned war horse as prouse or meek. It had power under authority. It had strength under control. It never lost its spirited, strong, and passionate nature, but it learned to bring its nature under discipline. It gave up being wild, unruly, and out of control and rebellious. The war horse had learned to bring that nature under control. So this here is the quality that Paul says is a result of the Holy Spirit at work in our lives. It's a positive and a courageous quality of trusting that God's outcome is the best outcome, of giving up rebelling against God. It has none of the overtones of timidity or weakness that we might associate with the word meekness now. But it's exactly the opposite of the aggressive, overconfident attitude that's so often the first face we put on when we're striving for our own particular outcome. However, there's at least one Bible commentator that takes a different point of view on how this word is used and thinks that Xenophon was actually describing not the horse, but the horseman. The horseman was to be prouse, strong and gentle, to condition the horse to be courageous and obedient. He was never to be cruel or harsh, but was always to be correcting rather than punishing. And we'll look at that a few minutes in relation to Jesus. But first, we'll take a look at Moses. Now, we're told that Moses was more meek than anyone else who ever lived. And yet Moses repeatedly wrestled things out with God. And God listened to him. And God answered him. Being meek doesn't mean we don't have questions for God. Instead, meekness empowers us to come to God boldly and trust his direction. That's a privilege that comes to us when we approach God with meekness. He'll listen to us. He'll take account of our concerns, and he'll show us the way forward. I struggled to come to a modern definition of spiritual meekness, so I borrowed a framework from the Apostle Paul, who gave us his wonderful word picture of love in terms of human qualities. And I tried to draw together some of the human qualities of meekness in the same way, and this was the result. Meekness is gentle. Meekness is strong and powerful. It doesn't retaliate, but stands firm and isn't weak. It doesn't lose its head. It isn't easily provoked, isn't impatient, and controls its temper. It isn't a pushover and doesn't tolerate injustice, but endures hopefully and is courageous in making peace. It doesn't pursue its own agenda. It's guided by the Lord. It always forbears, always respects, always trusts God's direction, always strives for good. Meekness never makes things worse. Now, at its very source, meekness is Christ-like. So who recognises this character here? Maybe some of the children are still watching and some of them will know who he is. So of course, this is the genie from Disney's film Aladdin. And let's see if he can teach us something about meekness. I'm going to ask Timothy to share a video clip with us now. It's a very short video clip, so it should play through twice.